The UK has some of the most renowned institutions of education in the world, but have the youth of today lost the value of education, and who's to be responsible? Join me for real stories, real issues, real views. This is Real Talk. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Real Talk, the show that discusses current issues affecting our youth. I'm your host, Emir Baramovic, and I'll be joining Ghalib in discussing the issues that matter to you. Today, we're in St. Joseph's College and we're continuing with our Real Talk UK tour, and we'll be talking about education. As always, I'm joined by
Education is extremely important in today's society. It is a way of developing oneself physically, socially, and mentally. Emphasis is placed on educating the youth because it is in their schooling years that they develop their own job prospects and options for their further career. It is also important because in your schooling life you realise that you are not just an individual but a citizen in a part of society, and through your education you can work to change that society. Statistics show that the educational record in the UK is impeccable. With around 370,000 students coming to study in British universities from abroad, our educational system has international acclaim.
We're coming to the end of Lamia, and you'll be moving on to Leavers St Agnes shortly. So, the reading I gave you was a comparison in some ways, but an analysis of both the poems that we've studied so far.
Last year, GCSE grades were boosted. 7 out of 10 papers were marked as a C grade and a quarter as A's or A stars. These increased results have allowed schools to take GCSEs in the core subjects, English, Maths and Science, a year early, and many of these go on to take AS level subjects a year early as well. But do these headline results present a misleading picture of performance? It has been argued by some that exams are getting easier and that the standard of teaching in schools is declining. Whilst there is no evidence for this, a new government scheme plans to pay off the student debt of top-level academics who plan to become teachers. At the end of the day, the fundamental purpose of education is to create mature and learned students who go on to run the society that they live in. But how well do students value the opportunity that they have?
Right, looking at the current generation of youth today, I feel that our generation, education-wise, doesn't value as much as before. Looking at GCSEs now, and how easy they are compared to O-levels and when our parents' times. An O-level was around, at maths, an O-level was a C, which is equivalent to an A star at GCSE. So I feel that youths, they're not really taking it as seriously because even though as our generation gets, I don't know if it's smarter or, I wouldn't say more stupid, but even though we're getting smarter or more stupid, GCSEs are getting easier.
I think that as time goes on, as you go from high school to college, people start valuing education more because they know that they have to do what they have to do. They have to learn, so they study more. But at high school, you're a young child, your parents are on your case, study, study, study. You might sit down, but you won't take anything in.
I think that the lower class your family is, the more you have the urge to educate yourself because you want to be out of that environment and go further up in the world.
I don't think that they have lost the value of education. I think it's perhaps valued more as people feel more under pressure to get results and get a place at university. So I don't think that they don't value education anymore. I think it's still an important part of their lives.
I think the youth of today want to succeed. I think that when given the tools to succeed, they will do so. I think, if anything, the only thing we need to work on is inspiring and motivating them. But from my experience, when boys are given credit and when boys are motivated, they'll go to extraordinary lengths to do themselves justice.
I think
again, from my experience, we've got a lot of fantastic teachers in this school and in the schools I've worked in previously. I think every student requires something different. I think the attempts to give a personalised education are good. I think that's along the right lines. I think some more attention must be paid to the practical side of things, what a single teacher is capable of. And I think that teachers are perhaps under a little bit of strain in terms of giving each student adequate attention.
I think that the older the students are, the more respectful they are towards teachers. I think that as they get older and they work harder, they begin to realise how much more difficult it is for teachers, and they realise that if they want to be well educated, they have to behave and be respectful. So I think that people are unfair to say that pupils aren't respectful towards teachers, because I find the older pupils are the most respectful in the school, and we tend to have really good established relationship with them when they're older.
Welcome back. I hope that was interesting for you. Right, we're going to carry on straight into the discussion, and I'm going to introduce the panel for you. First of all, Jeff Whitty, thank you for joining us today. He is the former director of the Institute of Education. Thank you for coming down. Next to him, Councillor Richard Hilton of Merton Council. Thank you for your time today. And Kate Vintner, Director of Hounslow Education Business Partnership. Thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us. And Nadeem Rahman, Assistant Head Teacher of a school in Sutton. Right, with the introductions done, let's get right underway. We want to look at the shift in the value of education amongst the youth today. And I'm going to go straight to Jeff. Jeff, what shift have you seen in education in the system over the last decade?
Well, in terms of the way the system's organised, we've had a huge emphasis from government on education. In the 1997 general election, Tony Blair said he was going to make education his top 3 priorities. And his opponent, John Major, said, yes, I'm also going to make education my top priorities, but not necessarily in that order. So Tony Blair really set the pattern. But in fact, there's not a lot of difference between the parties. The parties have all, really since 1988, taken the view that government has got to prescribe some core activities at the centre, and then parents and pupils are to be allowed to choose different types of school and the particular school they attend. So at governmental level, we've got government deciding on a set of knowledge and values that ought to be taught, and then allowing parents to choose where they're taught. I think in terms of whether people value education, we've got to take a rather longer look, because I think the reason we worry people don't value education enough is because education is now so important. You can't get anywhere in work, in life, really without having a good education. Whereas 50 years ago, there were unskilled jobs which didn't require education. So we've got to be careful when we make judgments that youth have lost the value of education. I think education has become much more important.
Sure, thank you. Right, if I can just jump to Nadeem. What sort of changes, obviously you being in the teaching environment, what sort of changes have you seen, and more importantly, I want to ask as well, do you feel that the government has taken education as a priority?
No, I actually agree with Jeff. What he said is quite true. A lot of governments, whoever they may be, Labour or Conservative, definitely haven't, in my eyes, taken education as a high priority. The curriculum changes that are occurring every 4 or 5 years, I think, is evidence of that. Funding, like the business, the building schools for funding that has actually been dropped, is an issue that I think has affected schools. Strategy from the top keeps on changing, and I think that has a negative effect down below in the coalface where teachers have to teach.
Okay, right, moving on to the value of education. I want to go to the audience. I think that would be the most fairest to have a look and see. Guys, just I mean, do you still value education? How much value do you have on education? Does anyone want to comment on something?
I value education quite highly because it won't allow me to, if I don't further my education, I don't think I'll be able to achieve the targets I've been set for myself ever since a young age, or get further in life, essentially.
Okay, yeah. Wow, that's interesting. Right, let me get one more view. Do you think it's fair to say that youth has lost the value in education?
I feel that the value of education comes from a child's upbringing. So if their parent has steered them towards a career which involves something that needs academic qualifications, then that child will realise the value of education. Whereas if they've been steered towards something that involves construction, for example, they could have an apprenticeship which doesn't necessarily need education at a high level.
Okay, interesting. Richard, how do you feel about that view? Would you agree with that?
I think that's very sensible, actually. I mean, I think the importance of parents in terms of steering their children towards having a focus on education is absolutely vital. I think for too long now, actually, there's been almost an opt-out of saying, oh, well, it's actually the responsibility of the school or the government, and actually I think, you know, parents have a huge role to play in that. And I think, you know, the comment is spot on around if parent instills the value of education in their child, they will do that. I think also that the point I agree with there is, you know, that actually an academic education isn't the only way to be successful. And I think we've got to see much more focus on things like apprenticeships, business being involved, you know, where you can actually have things like modern apprenticeships now, and actually showing people that, you know, to have a degree is not the only way to be successful.
That's an interesting point. Kate, how do you feel about the value of education? How valuable is education in today's society, and how valuable is the extracurricular you know, working businesses?
I think education is extremely valuable, but I think that the 2 points from the audience were really apt in summarising where young people are today in terms of the parental background and support in the home life, in setting that value, but crucially around engagement. I think young people engage with education when A, they enjoy it, and B, they can see a purpose in it. And I think that if you create your education offer with a purpose in mind, you know, seeing progression routes, seeing why are we doing this subject, seeing how is this going to help me in the future in my life, then I think that the value, you know,
is really important.
Really
Nadeem, I want to come to you again. Do you think that the education system that was before is still preparing the youth of today?
Yes, I do think, but before I answer that, if I could come to a point Richard made, which I totally agree with, but I see in the coalface in school having a big effect, are things like vocational education. The value of vocational education, we're still waiting for the government paper in April.
The real question is the education preparing the youth for the workplace? Are they getting the training that they need for the jobs that are out there?
No, I don't think so at all. Yes, there are certain aspects and certain careers where there is development and training available, but still, as I go back to vocational education, you know, even that, there's a big question mark there at the moment. We don't know what's the value of that at secondary school. We're waiting for the paper to come out in April. Now that, in my eyes, is quite demoralizing for students. If they don't want to go through the academic route and they want to go for vocational education, like we've been told, they don't have the ability at the moment because they don't know the value of it.
Okay.
The problem is that we're getting mixed messages from employers and from government. I mean, at the moment, the Department for Education seems to be emphasising academic education, whereas the Department for Business seems to be emphasising
that's a brilliant point. Kate, what are the government doing? I mean, how are we preparing the youth for the workplace?
I don't think that the two are mutually exclusive.
Oh, absolutely not. We've had examples like the Tomlinson report, which actually got the balance right. Unfortunately, the Labour government rejected it, and it's now past history. But there are ways of making sure people have a broad and balanced education up to 14 or 16,
Richard, I just
and then
want to interject
specialise.
with you as well. What does the local council do? What is the local government doing?
I mean, nationally, of course, the government are introducing 75,000 adult apprenticeships, and I think you know, we've got to get this balance right. It's not just about either you're academic or you're not. And I think, you know, as I said, we've got to get involved in that. So, for example, there are now a lot of voluntary organisations which local councils and local schools can work with. So things like Career Academies UK, Young Enterprise, where they actually are bringing students, and they're not necessarily, you know, the top performing students, bringing students into the workplace, actually giving them a sight of what they can achieve if they actually focus on their studies. And I think, you know, there's a huge role for voluntary organisations like that to be involved, and then to work closely with business and with schools in a partnership, because actually we've got to all have our part in this. And I think the local council's role in that is actually coordinating and assisting those organisations to get involved with their schools. And I said it's something I'm personally involved with. I think it's worked very well.
That's really interesting. I'm going to come to the audience. Guys, how do you feel about all of these incentives that they're talking about? I mean, do you feel like the access is there? Do you feel like, yes, there are loads of things for us to do, for us to get training? I mean, yeah, go on, gentlemen.
In terms of education, preparing students for the workplace, I do feel that students need extra initiative. Like, the education system is not enough to prepare someone for a workplace, because if you come straight from school into a place of work, you will feel out of place. So in order to reach the height of your goal, you do need to take initiative.
And I guess it starts at home, really, with the parents and things like that. Kate, are parents taking enough initiative in supporting their children? I mean, has that...
I think that the role of parents is absolutely crucial in setting those values and instilling those values at a young age. But I think what is also important is the roles that schools have to play, teachers have to play, and crucially businesses have to play. And just picking up on the point that we were talking about earlier, there are education business partnerships across the whole of the UK who work primarily in engaging parents, businesses and schools working together. And so I think when all key partners are all working together, doing the bits that they're good at, then I think that, you know, that drives success, really.
So, Nadeem, have you seen these initiatives benefit the youth? Have you seen it?
Yes, while I'm a critic of what happens at government level and maybe even local authority level and even school level, but going back to your earlier question, I do believe there's a problem with parents playing a big role with their child's education. I can't recall, but the figure of surveys being returned by parents to schools is as low as 25%.
So, okay, what point would you have for the parents out there watching the show today? What would you say to them to initiate more? What advice would you have for them?
Well, I think parents need to take a keen look at what their child is doing. They need to be aspirational. They need to make sure they set their goals where they think their child could achieve. That doesn't necessarily mean academics all the time. It could mean more vocational education. But the key message, even at Parents' Evening, parents sit there in front of you and they say, how's my child getting on? You tell them and that's it. They want to walk away. They don't know what's going on.
Interesting. Jeff, would you agree?
Well, we have a saying based on the research which says schools matter, teachers matter more, families matter most, and we better add businesses matter as well. But the thing about this is, yes, we've got to encourage lots of parental involvement, and there have been lots of initiatives on that, but there are always going to be some parents who either don't wish to support their children in education or don't have the background knowledge to know how to do it, and that's where teachers really matter. And what we've actually got to do is to get the best teachers teaching the kids who need it most because they haven't got support at home. So absolutely, yes, get parents involved, but realise that teachers also can make a difference.
I want to come to the audience and ask, guys, do you feel like you're getting enough career advice? Do you feel like there's enough career advice available to you out there? Yes, sir.
Hi. Yeah, I just want to raise a slight issue with what's being said. It's all well and good involving business in education and preparing people for the working life that follows education, but it seems to me that the crux of education is being missed. It's to broaden your horizons, to make you grow as a person, to get you to challenge things, to think independently. And everything that's been said seems to have missed that point. I became a teacher not to prepare people for work. Obviously, that was part of what I'm doing as a teacher. But ultimately, I came to guide them into adulthood, make them people that can contribute in a positive way to society, and think for themselves and act independently, not just to facilitate business by producing
Do you think that perhaps
capital
too
stock,
much
if you like.
pressure has been put on teachers because of that?
Not necessarily on teachers, I think on young people. From what I've heard, a lot of emphasis on their discussion amongst themselves is on career paths. It's not necessarily focusing on developing as young people and into adulthood. So I think the emphasis, the shift must be addressed in some way and put the emphasis back on learning for the sake of learning.
Very interesting. Richard, how would you
absolutely
respond?
take that point. I think that's true. I mean, the focus so far of the discussion has been around career paths and progression, and actually the young people themselves talked about how they want to develop. But I think you're absolutely right. I think, you know, whilst we need to encourage people to, you know, young people to start to think for themselves, well, we need to make sure that they are equipped with the basics for life, though, so things like numeracy, literacy, and so on, which is absolutely right. But then, of course, you can actually encourage them to think for themselves. And I think actually part of the curriculum now should be around looking at, well, what can we do to actually encourage teachers to make lessons interesting, not to have such a prescriptive curriculum, for example, where you have to learn this, you have to learn that. Actually allow the teachers who are there to be, you know, the creative educators to have that authority.
Nadeem, how do you feel about that?
I totally agree with Richard's point, but unfortunately, with the narrowing of the curriculum now, that Michael Gove has done with humanities and modern foreign languages, in my opinion, will make a detrimental effect, because it will pigeonhole students into these boxes that they have to conform to so they can get a baccalaureate or some other qualifications that will enable that school to be high on their Ofsted reports or in their standards.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, I think what's interesting, and I agree with what's been said, is that the basics are necessary but not sufficient. And you look at Asian countries, which have been very good on the basics, they are now looking to get their pupils to engage more critically with the knowledge, to do more artistic activities, some of the very things that are possibly being squeezed out. But as Richard said, what the government is doing is narrowing the core and possibly giving some space for people to do these other things. What it's not doing is prescribing what those other things should be.
Right.
But as I said, I actually think the feedback that has been given is that actually schools and teachers want to have that freedom to do that. That actually, for too long, and that's the point you made earlier, actually, there's been so much central control. So I do agree. You know, if you start to shrink the core curriculum too much, you can lose. And as somebody that studied languages myself, I think it's a real shame that it's no longer, it's now optional to do languages and you can stop at the age of 14. But actually, I do think the only way you can give the schools more opportunity to start to pick for themselves what they want to teach is to actually shrink that core curriculum. So as I said, you can't have it both ways. You've got to do something to free up the teachers to actually have that decision making.
Very, very interesting. If I can just jump to Nadeem, how can we instill confidence in the youth of today?
Well, I think it has to start from the home, and I'm a firm believer of that. So I think there's more of a social reason that needs to be looked at on top of an educational reason, and making sure the practices actually meet that. But I think confidence, good teaching, outstanding qualities, inspiring children, being creative all the time. And, one of my best lessons I ever teach is when I am casual in the class, when children are assessing themselves, they're telling me what their next steps are. And if you can do that in the class, I think you've done your job.
Okay, how do you feel? I mean, what are businesses doing to encourage?
I think businesses are getting more and more involved in education, but I think going back to the point that was made earlier, the two things about getting to grips with the basics and having vision and progression routes and things when you do leave school aren't mutually exclusive. And I do think that the English back sort of perspective is actually quite a sensible one, because we're getting the basics right, but then there's flexibility enough to be able to select a route or a progression route or really an interest in what young people are doing. And so I think so long as that flexibility is there, then I think it will work.
You had a quick point to say?
As well, you know, school's not just about education, it's about the extracurricular activities that it gives the pupils the opportunity to be involved as well. So things like team sports, to be involved in drama, all those sort of things actually that are really, really important to you developing as a young person. So actually, you know, the school and young people being there, they can learn through those extracurricular activities just as much as they learn in their academic lessons. And I think that's why it's vital that we do encourage schools to continue to offer those sort of activities for young people.
Okay, that's interesting. I want to step outside of England now a little bit. Jeff, if I can turn to you. Recent studies have shown that England has decreased in the values of education, in the standards. And how would you respond to this? How would you?
Well, I think you're talking about the various international league tables, like the
PISA study.
Yeah. Well, certainly we are dropping down the league table, but that's not necessarily because what we're doing is getting worse. It's much more to do with other people getting better faster and new countries coming into those league tables. So in the most recent one, Shanghai, the Shanghai region of China has done brilliantly. They used not to be in the league tables. So the problem is not so much standards are dropping in this country, the problem is they are not rising as fast as they are elsewhere. And we've really, really got to address that as an urgent problem.
Have we got some points that perhaps we've seen from other countries that we could bring to the table here for us in the UK as well? Do you think there's something that we can also incorporate as well that others are doing that we're not doing at the moment, or not as much perhaps?
Well, I think one of the things that studies of other countries have shown is you go through different periods, so that you need a lot of central prescription to get to a certain standard, and then you need to give the professionals more confidence and more trust to take it to the next stage. What happened was the Labour government did manage to raise basic literacy and numeracy, but then it plateaued. You need a different sort of approach now, and there's some evidence that the current government is trying to do that. The problem is it's doing it in a situation where expenditure at most is going to be flat and could go down. Other countries, some of the countries at the top of these league tables invest a lot more, and they certainly invest their money a lot more smartly, and I think that's a lesson we've got to learn.
It sounds a little bit to me like there's a lot more being put on league tables rather than the value itself for the youth. Kate, I'm going to turn to you. Do you feel like there's more attention being put on a performance, or do you think that? How do you?
I think that schools are clearly aware of their performance and have got targets that they have to meet, and I think that sometimes that drives the curriculum. But I equally feel that schools are doing a lot to support students in the vocational offer, in doing things like extracurricular activities, which we've spoken about. And so I do think performance tables are important and are definitely a driver for schools in today's Britain.
Okay. Interesting. I'm just going to stop you there, Kate. Unfortunately, we've come to the end of this part of the show. We're going to go to a quick break now, but do stay with us. When we come back, we want to look at the challenges and the differences in social inequality and what that brings.
The Review of Religions is one of the longest-running religious magazines. In print since 1902, it continues to play an important role in presenting the noble teachings of Islam, reflecting its rational, harmonious and inspiring nature. It features articles and viewpoints on different religions, making religion and religious philosophy accessible to a wider readership. The Review of Religions was founded by Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, peace be upon him, who claimed on the basis of divine revelation that he was the promised Messiah and Mahdi, whose advent had been foretold by the Holy Prophet of Islam, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, and by the scriptures of other faiths. The annual subscription of this unique and enlightening magazine is just £15 per year or $30. To receive your copy of the Review of Religions, visit our website at www.reviewofreligions.org, where you can browse past issues and subscribe online, or contact us by email to info@reviewofreligions.org. The Review of Religions, a unique magazine of religious thought.
And now an important announcement. All broadcasts of MTA International in Urdu, English and MTA Al Arabiya are being transmitted on the internet via web streaming and can be watched anywhere in the world by directly accessing MTA's own website, www.mta.tv. MTA streaming is a service initiated by Hadrat Khalifatul Masih, may Allah strengthen his hand, a few years ago. It is exclusively provided by MTA International for its viewers across the globe. Although this service can be accessed through other Jamaat sites, for the convenience of use and better results, please ensure to use MTA's official website, www.mta.tv. Also, your comments, concerns, any reports of non-availability, and the true user data would reach us quicker and more accurately if you are using www.mta.tv to watch MTA. So whether you're at home, the office, a hotel room, or on the go, remember you can watch MTA 24/7 by logging on to www.mta.tv. That is www.mta.tv.
Welcome back to part 2. Here we're going to be talking about the social inequalities and how that's affecting the whole situation. Has the system failed both teachers and students by removing the discipline and structure necessary to produce responsible and useful members of society? Nadeem, why have teachers lost so much authority over the last decade?
Well, I think your question is slightly incorrect. I don't think teachers have lost their control in classes. Yes, there are always issues, and there are always issues that could be, made sure that they are corrected. But I don't think teachers have lost power at all. In my opinion, I think there are issues with some schools where they don't use behaviour policies effectively, but importantly, in my opinion, as a teacher in the classroom, it's down to how a child is raised at home, what are their responsibilities, how have they been moulded to get on with people.
Okay, so Kate, I want to turn to you. Do you think that children have lost the value of authority? Do you think they've lost the authority for teachers?
I don't think they have, but I think that the key to good teaching and learning in a classroom is engagement. And I think that when students are engaged in the learning process because they're interested in it, they can see value in it, they can see a purpose in it, then the behaviour takes care of itself. If there are a couple of students who, are being disruptive and preventing that engagement, then clearly that's got to be dealt with. But the key for me in teaching and learning is about engagement.
Okay, interesting.
That's absolutely right. The House of Commons Education Select Committee has just looked at this. It says, there is a problem about some extreme bad behaviour, but the main issue is low-level disruption. And there, the evidence the committee got suggested appropriate curricula, engaging teaching, together with backing from senior staff when things do go wrong, and consistent policies right across the school so that the pupils know what is expected of them and know what will happen when they don't meet those expectations.
So I guess that almost answers the question, you've obviously been in education for quite a while, where do you think the problem lies?
Well, I'd say it's not an entirely new problem. My dad told me some pretty hairy stories about teaching in the East End of London between the wars. And as a grammar school pupil myself, I remember being quite horrible to ineffective teachers. I think the thing is now, with children all in one school, you have a number of different issues coming together. But the issue, as I've said, is getting, as Kate says, engaging teaching and appropriate curricula.
Interesting. All right, audience, again, I want to ask you, do you think students are showing enough respect for the teachers, and vice versa? Do you think the teachers are showing enough respect for the students?
I don't think there's one answer to that problem, because every situation is different depending on the school, depending on the child's upbringing, depending on his circumstances at home. So in order for teachers to be able to find an answer to that, then they'll need to be interacting with social services, different jobs in the community, so that they can understand where each child is coming from. But it's a very hard job, because you need to know each child in depth to know how to deal with each problem.
Okay, interesting. At the front.
I think that with students, authority comes from respect. Sometimes, quite a lot in classes, you find that the teacher doesn't give the students that enough respect, and that shows when it comes to behaviour. And I think that if the teacher shows respect to the student, they will definitely get it back, and that helps the behaviour of the class. And also, authority, it should start in the home. If there's a lot of authority in the home, as if when you're told to do something, you'll do it, and when you come to school, that will definitely be the case.
Okay, interesting. Young lady, what are your thoughts on the matter?
I think that if a teacher puts in the extra effort, then a child will as well. It just goes both ways. I don't think that I would personally, if I saw a teacher not putting in the effort in teaching me, I wouldn't want to behave well to them or anything in class.
Okay, yeah, one more point.
I find out when a child's brought up by their parents, depending on how they brought them up, with discipline and authority, it reflects back on the teachers. If the teacher shows the student what's going on in the lesson, inspires them, engages them, authority, respect and behaviour just comes automatically.
Okay, I want to jump a little bit to an official level. And Nadeem, what about yourself? Obviously, again, being assistant head teacher, do you feel that students have lost the respect for authority over the last 10 years? Do you think that's been a...
And I go back to what I said, but after hearing the views, and especially Jeff's, I totally agree. Of course, in the class, the teacher on micro level has to be attractive enough to teach that child so that child is engaged. And yes, behavior control does have to start from the class, and I totally appreciate that. But what I do find over and over again, the involvement from parents with their child's education, unfortunately, in my opinion, is not suffice. I think it could be improved, and I think more work from the government needs to be done looking at social issues and looking at issues that could actually have that triangular relationship between parents, schools, and obviously the child linked up. And I know they attempted it with the START programs and the programs in early years, but even that now we know is being discontinued. So, you know, my question is, who is picking that up? Who's making that triangular link so everything between parents, teachers and the child can be well and can actually move forward for the child's education?
I want to take another teacher's point of view, if I may. What are your thoughts on the matter?
I think that issues with regard to respect to teachers have to start at home. I've seen it firsthand, and I've spoken to colleagues, and the utter disrespect you're faced with at times is a joke. You do feel at times that you can't do anything about it.
Okay.
I wouldn't say I necessarily suffer from it greatly. I think I've got quite a presence in the classroom, but I've spoken to other teachers, and I've witnessed at first hand other teachers being totally disrespected before they've even begun a lesson. So the fact that you must engage with the pupils and find it something interesting enough to get the pupils' attention is all well and good, but if you're not shown deference and due respect initially to conduct the lesson, you're going to struggle.
That's interesting. I'm sensing a slightly different view on this as well. I'm sensing a slightly different factor that's also affecting, and that's the aspirations that youth have to see today. And then the immediate question arises, are the youth of today aspiring to be famous, or are they aspiring to be wealthy or businessmen, or what's the situation? Kate, what are your thoughts?
Speaking from previous experience of heading the education for the Premier League for 10 years before I took this job, I think I probably have the authority to say that even if you do aspire to be famous, you still have to do an in-depth education programme. Every young footballer, contrary to popular belief, actually comes away from a Premier League club with at least a 4A level equivalent in an apprenticeship in sporting excellence.
So it's about establishing a strong foundation for a career path, really, isn't it?
I think it's about transferable skills, and I think that with aspiration, so long as your aspirations are based upon pragmatism, then I don't think that we should be inhibiting aspirations of young people. I think we should be encouraging them, supporting them, but with the reality of getting those transferable skills. So no matter which career path you want, you end up with a bag of qualifications or experiences that you can take forward into whatever path you choose to take.
I think it's worth noting that research suggests that the majority of 11-year-olds aspire to go to university, right across the social range. And so, although some individuals are sort of turned on to the celebrity culture, relatively few do that at the expense of thinking about other things. The real problem is, of those 11-year-olds, a lot of them then don't get the academic achievements that they need to even be considered for university. So I don't think there's a lack of ambition. I think there's a lack of achievement, and that's what we've got to tackle in schools.
Maybe perhaps from the external influences like the media. Nadeem, how do you think the media are playing a role within educating and preparing youth on a subconscious level? Are we instilling enough value in education?
No, I don't think so. I think the media could do more. But just returning to an earlier point of behaviour, there are plenty of schemes, facilities in this country whereby restorative justice occurs and behaviour is managed. There are programs around whereby parents, children and teachers sit together, have a lovely conversation, actually make a program of correcting behaviour. Yet, my point is, the money for that is hard to get to. So you might have 5 children.
Well, I mean, I think as well, we need to look at what do young people see as a success. And it's not all about, as I said before, it's not all about academic in the sense of traditional university achievement. So, for example, one of the things we are looking at is creating new technical academies. Actually, you can be successful in the sense of, we measure success potentially of a graduate in terms of the potential they can earn £100,000 over a lifetime, more than somebody who doesn't have a degree. But actually, if you look now at many of the vocational professions, those people are easily earning the same as a graduate from the very, very beginning. But without, of course, getting into a student loan to pay for that. And I think we need to sort of look at, well, what actually does create success in life? And we judge at the moment, as Jeff said about, so many young people want to go to university. I think it's exaggerated the extent to which all young people want to be a celebrity and so on. I think they are generally, I think we do them a disservice by assuming that's all they want to achieve. And actually, as you can see from this audience, they're focused on, as the young lady said, she wants to understand about, in the real world, learning things like, how she does a budget, or how, the skills she might need in the workplace, whatever it might be. And I think, actually young people are realistic, and I think most of them do have aspirations, but we need to give them the opportunity that isn't just about necessarily a university opportunity, but these new technical academies will actually allow young people to focus. And we can learn from many of our neighbours. So, for example, in Germany, they've always had a system where you can go and have a technical education or an academic education. I think we can learn a lot from that.
We're a little bit pressed for time. I'm sorry to cut this debate short. I want to move on to the real big area right now, and that's the social gap. Richard, I want to come back to you again. Council leaders in London warned that pupil premium could disadvantage the poorest parts of the country, and say that children in the capital stand to lose out by about 16 million. What are your comments?
Okay, so the pupil premium, I would challenge that assertion first of all. The pupil premium is actually targeted at those students from disadvantaged backgrounds. It's actually about, so for example, in my borough of Merton, we'll be getting an additional £1.2 million of funding coming from the pupil premium, which will actually go straight into the head teacher's pot for them to actually decide on where that money needs to be spent. And I think that's absolutely the right thing to do. I absolutely accept the point around central funding being squeezed at the moment, and that actually reflects the reality of the national situation we're in. We've got some of that. We're paying £120 million a day in debt interest, for example. But actually, the pupil premium I see as a very positive thing, because that will actually give head teachers money that they can spend and focus on pupils from not just disadvantaged backgrounds, but also children of the armed services and so on. I think that's actually a very positive thing.
Okay, that's interesting. Audience, how do you feel about this? Do you think that everyone from all backgrounds are receiving an equal opportunity on?
Speaking about how schools spend money, I don't think that a service such as the PTA is used to its full advantage, because parents have a direct line to their child, obviously, and so does a teacher. So that's where they could meet in the middle, and then they can see where the money should be spent so that it will be the best for the student, who is the most important person in the school.
Okay, interesting. Point at the front there.
Well, with regard to education and the social gap or inequalities, I think that the very structure of the education system and the fact there's a two-tier education system, being the public-funded public school sector and then the private state school sector, I think creates an imbalance, and it's a fixed mechanism to keep the social order as it is. It's unquestionably a facilitator of the social gap. And I think you refer to £120 million worth of debt payments, interest on the national debt. I'm an economics teacher, so I'm aware of that to a degree. But I still think cutting back on education, and it's the education of those at the lower social sectors, it's not the upper social sectors, and I think that's an issue we could go into in depth. But ultimately, that £120 million worth of debt interest could be found from big business. It could be, if the will was there, it could be found from big business, and the education could have been ring-fenced, and indeed more money could have been put into education.
There a little bit. I want to come back to equal opportunities.
So in fact, we haven't seen a reduction in the schools' budget. So schools will be getting the same level of funding. It's a misconception to say the schools' budget has been cut.
For some schools they will be getting a reduction. I mean, the pupil premium is absolutely vital, and I think it's a brilliant idea, and I absolutely support it. It's too low, it's about £430 per pupil, but hopefully if the economy picks up, it will go up. Because the problem in this country, compared with other countries in those league tables, is not actually the top performing students. We do virtually as well as anyone in the world. It's this long tail of underachievement. If this government genuinely puts money into supporting disadvantaged children, and the money gets to the right place in the schools and is used for schemes that actually work to improve the performance of children on free school meals relative to the others, that will be a huge gain that this country really needs if it's going to compete in the world these days.
Kate, what do you think are the main solutions in bridging that gap and really getting equal opportunities out there for everyone from all backgrounds?
I think we need more support across the board, really. I think we need to have targeted support around free school meals students and really giving them the opportunities that the other students do have to be able to achieve and to be able to reach those attainment levels that they're currently not reaching. I think that the point made earlier is correct. I mean, it's not the top end that aren't achieving. It's that middle band that we really need to push up to make sure that every child really achieves their full potential.
Okay. Jeff, I want to turn to you with that question as well. Is there generally a low sense of morale amongst students from poor backgrounds?
I think this is a very individual thing. I mean, as has already been said, there are some highly aspirational students from poor backgrounds. But I think there are real issues about how far they can progress. I mean, there's some really sort of startling statistics about for instance, the numbers of children on free school meals who get to Oxbridge. This is quoted in the government's white paper. And so I think we've got to make sure that the few individuals who do achieve, whether it's in business or at university or indeed in Premier League soccer, are there for others to see that it's possible, and therefore you can attack the problem of low morale by showing that it is possible to achieve, but you also have to help them, as I've said before, to understand how to achieve when in fact your families perhaps haven't had a background of going to university, for instance.
We're drawing towards the end of the time that we have today, and we're coming to the end of the discussion. I want to look at the future of education in Britain. Richard, what changes are you expecting to see over the next decade in education?
Okay, I think we're going to see a move towards more local decision-making for schools. I think we're going to see a move towards actually universities actually having more pressure to address this issue that Jeff raises about. So, for example, Oxbridge, for example, taking more students as part of the sort of the handoff from being able to charge an increased fee. They will be therefore expected to take more people from underprivileged backgrounds. I think that's very, very important that we address that. And as I said, I think there's going to be much more move towards choice. What I would like to see in a couple of years' time, as hopefully the economy starts to recover, is they're actually able to start to reinvest and increase funding in education again. That's certainly the direction I'd like to see it moving in.
Okay, Nadeem, how do you see the education moving forward in the next decade?
How do I see, or what I would like it to be? I think if I stick with the latter and say I would like to have clearer direction, making sure that we are there for the students, we can make sure that the students attain as much as they can, because after all, and it's a motto I've always had dear to my heart, is the students are our future. If we cannot invest in them, what will our future be like? And that is something that I always say to my students when I'm in assembly with them, and they are money orientated, they want the best Beamers or what have you. But ultimately, when they leave education or they get to sixth form, they do know they want a better future. So they are our future, and we need to invest in them.
Okay, would you like to see a shift towards more vocational training?
If it was purposeful and what business wants, then I think that would be a positive step forward. I see the future of education in Britain as bright. I think we're moving in the right direction. I think we're going to be focusing far more upon core values and getting everybody up to the standards that business expect, and then hopefully having enough flexibility within the curriculum to inspire people to take their chosen career path, whatever that might be. I wouldn't say that about where we're going with adult education, but I do think from the school's perspective, you know, we're there. I would like to say that I do think also that businesses are going to have more and more of an impact and support of schools, and then influence the direction.
Okay, interesting. Jeff, what are your comments?
In terms of the future, I think we've got to up our game to compete in the world, and I think crucial to that is the standard of teaching. We've already improved initial teacher training tremendously, and I think we now need to do a lot of work on improving the quality of the teaching force as a whole. Governments haven't done very much to support in-service training of teachers. This government is making schools responsible for it themselves, and we've really got to grasp that, because otherwise we will not be a world-class education system.
Wow, it's really interesting. Let's get a few points, closing points from the audience, please. What have you taken from this show?
I think as a student, I feel quite vulnerable because things in the education system have changed quite a lot during the last few years. Like before, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I knew that I wanted to study quite a lot until I was quite old. But regardless of what I do for A-levels, like now there's the question of the university fees and if I can actually go to university regardless of how well I do. So I don't know if the government are doing the right things, like if they know what to target in the education system.
Okay, thank you. Point at the front here.
I guess over the next 10 years, they need to decide really what the education system's actually for. Is it to educate people, or is it to keep the young people occupied, or is it simply to feed business?
Affirm a definition of purpose.
Yeah, exactly. And to actually, if it's going to be for knowledge and to help people grow, then focus it that way. If it's simply to supply business and industry, well then I think that's going to be disappointing and a bit of a shame, really.
Okay, sure. Someone else had a point? Yeah.
What I'd like to see in the future is in students installed how important education is and how it would further the life, whether getting a degree would profit them or taking a different career path. And the parents are well aware of this so that they can help the student progress in whatever they're passionate about or whatever they feel to take forward. Yeah.
Okay. Wow, interesting. A few more points here. Yeah.
I think that in order for the future of education to be bright, students need to understand the importance of general knowledge, because if they see that they're doing a subject that they're not going to take further after GCSEs, then they won't really see the importance of learning it. So they need to understand how important it is, because all knowledge is helpful in any workplace.
Okay, thank you. Unfortunately, we've run out of time for this program, and I'm just going to quickly wrap up and say education is still very, very important. A lot of emphasis is needed from the parents to enforce the respect of authority, and students are given the incentives and the direction. They just need to be given that power and that emotion for themselves to do it. Unfortunately, we have run out of time today. I want to give a special thanks to St. Joseph's College in Croydon today for letting us film, and of course, thank you very much to all our panelists and audiences. As always, you can keep in touch with the program by sending us your comments. Tell us what you think, tell us how you feel. Do you agree, do you disagree? Real Talk at mta.tv. That's how you can get in touch with us. And I hope you've enjoyed today's show, and I look forward to seeing you again for next time. Until next time, live with passion. Assalamu alaikum.